I want to apologize for being late. I had an interview for this. I was being interviewed by someone, and it's just way longer than expected. But thank you so much for your time today. This is the Live Better Now podcast. My name is Zach. I'm a life coach, personal growth coach, 2-time Ironman, author, and I'm extremely blessed. And I was looking forward to this conversation with you today, because we're going to talk about how billionaires get their health on track and reduce the aging. And off the record, I'm going to record the intro and things afterwards. So we're going to get right to the conversation to make the most out of our time. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've met more billionaires in the last month than I have in my whole life. So
really?
Many.
How many billionaires have you met in the last month?
Oh, man. I guess like 6.
Okay. And what are you doing with these billionaires?
So most of them are doing the IV treatments, the anti-aging stuff, and then some of them are doing the follistatin gene therapy too. Like, Brian Johnson?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's doing our follistatin, like he's going to be doing that soon. So we were talking with him and his team of doctors for a while, and so people like that.
Can you tell us what this is as simply as possible?
Follistatin is just a peptide, right? And so a peptide is just a chain of amino acids that makes a protein. And so most people understand intuitively what that means. It's just a signal to your body. So the most common one, the most famous one is insulin. Insulin was made like 80 years ago. So it's been around for a long time. But the problem with peptide synthesis was that we couldn't get down to the molecular level to make what we want. But now as science has evolved, we can make very specific peptides. We can make peptides to help you lose weight, like Ozempic, like the Kardashians obviously pumped that up and it's sold out everywhere because everyone wanted to, because they're like, oh, they're doing it, so we should all do it. So there was obviously that, but there's so many designer peptides. So it's not just like for weight loss, there's for regeneration, there's for healing, there's for brain fog, like neurodegenerative conditions. There's so many different peptides. And the biggest issue, a lot of people are probably wondering like why some people may have heard of them, but the problem is because you can't patent them. So the pharmaceutical companies can't make $1 billion off them. So you're not going to get that same press that you're going to get when a drug gets approval. When a drug gets approval, it gets FDA, and it goes through those routes. Then you get all this media attention and you get all this stuff, right? But peptides, because there's no one to patent, there's no billionaire to be made there. So it's just not, you're not going to get the same traction. But they've been around for a long time, and there's a lot of real world data with it.
Okay.
So to answer your question, so the follistatin, it sends a signal to your body to inhibit myostatin, which is a protein that sets a limit on how much muscle you can put on. So those jacked cows, like the really yolk ones. I don't know if you've seen those muscular cows.
Absolutely.
Because they have a myostatin deficiency, so they don't have enough, and so that's why they get so big. This isn't going to make you humongous, but it will increase lean body mass, and more importantly, it reduces systemic inflammation, and it also increases your lifespan.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, really amazing therapy. Yeah.
Seems like the fountain of youth.
It is. And I think one of your slogans was you want to help people look better and feel better, right? So this is one of the best ways to do it. And I think, almost everyone I talk to about it wants to try it. And because it's a no-brainer, there's no harm in it. But the technological breakthrough with this treatment that we have is that it's, instead of having to inject yourself with a peptide every day or twice a day, because that's the problem with peptides, they have short half-lives. This is called the gene therapy. So basically it's a plasmid, which is just this string of DNA, and essentially just secretes the peptide every day at a low dose in your body. So you do one injection and it lasts for up to 2 years.
Okay.
So that's the beauty of it. Okay.
So next question, how much does this one injection cost? Obviously it's not cheap.
Yeah, it's $25,000.
Okay.
But the price, as with any new technology, like think about this, like with electric vehicles, like Tesla, when it came out 10 years ago or 13 years ago, the first car was pretty crappy and it didn't have a great range and it was super expensive. So this is kind of like the beginning of revolution of gene therapy and cell therapy, which we'll talk about too. But this is, so our vision with the company is to eventually bring the price down to be like, maybe like 5,000. So it's more affordable. But right now it is expensive because there's a lot of R&D, obviously, and there's clinical trials we had to do. And that costs a lot of money, obviously, to get this product out there. But I can tell you that, like, even at that price point, like, a lot of people are willing to do it. And it's life-changing for a lot of people because it gets rid of inflammation, it helps with pain, it helps with energy, and it can obviously help with performance.
Yeah. You can't put a price on feeling better.
Exactly.
There's no price tag that you can put on feeling better. If there was a $100 billion shot that Warren Buffett could take to make him feel better in his 92-year-old body, he would probably give every single dollar, and he would do it twice. So, and what you mentioned about 45 seconds ago about bringing the cost down, I assume that that's because there's going to be a lot more competition, right? Other companies are probably working on this as well, and the more competition drives down the price. Am I accurate?
So we do have a patent.
Oh, okay.
So there is another company using a viral vector.
Okay.
But it's their treatment is like 200,000 to 300,000, so it's 10 times the price of ours actually. And not only that, the vector that we have, the plasmid vector, is actually safer because there's no actual bacteria or virus in there. So it's a plasmid, which means it's a bacterial origin, but there's no actual bacteria. The only competitor on the market right now, there's a viral vector one, but it's 10 times the price, and it's a virus. So there's always a risk of the virus invading or causing some sort of issue. So we have a pretty clear advantage, and our main investors are Peter Thiel, like Thiel Capital, and Sam Altman, the ChatGPT guy. So we have really big backing. So like, I'm not overly worried about competition because we're just gonna crush them because we have the best technology, and we have a
deep pocket.
And we have, like, obviously I'm very well connected with a lot of influencers and celebrities around the world, and so I'm getting connected with a lot of like high up people, and so I don't think it won't be a long time before you hear about this everywhere.
Amazing. So when we talk about the high profile people you've worked with and have treated, a lot of high profile celebrities, athletes, and all the way to the richest man in Dubai. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, what you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we posted a picture together on Instagram, so that's open public knowledge. So, but his name is Mohammed Alabbar, and he's the richest businessman in Middle East. And obviously that says a lot because the Middle East, there's a lot of wealth there. And so, but the reason he is because, the tallest building in the world, Burj Khalifa.
Absolutely.
So he built that, and he built and EMAAR, he owns a company, EMAAR, which is one of the biggest developers in the Middle East. And so he's a really, really, sought after guy. And it's the craziest story because like, it's literally the guy, the personal trainer to the Crown Prince of Dubai follows me on Instagram. And then when this guy had like a shoulder injury and the knee, they were like, "Oh, who's the best for like, like the regenerative stuff?" And they're like, "This guy." So then it's just, so they flew me down, and I treated him, and it was amazing. And I treated his wife too, and it worked for her. And so they were really happy with my services. And obviously we're very, very well connected. And so I met other billionaires, and I met royal families, and I went to royal families' palaces and all sorts. And I just kind of took off from there. And that was only a year ago, but it feels like that was like 5 years because so much has happened in the past year. But it's just been wild. It's been a wild ride.
Unbelievable. Can you name drop any other high profile celebrities and athletes you've worked with?
I don't think I can because confident, but let's just say top NFL players, top NHL, top NBA, like it's and like musicians, like a lot of people would know who they are.
Amazing. So, there's a ton of value that you can bring to the audience today. And I wanted to decide how I want to go with this conversation. Now, I feel like the whole anti-aging topic and doing it in a holistic way would be something that my audience would gain a lot of value from if that's something you want to talk about. But I feel like you are more of an expert and you're more niched into this regenerative medicine.
Yep.
So I kind of want to go down that route. So can we talk a little bit about stem cell research or what is the term, stem cell therapy?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't mind talking a little bit about longevity too, but in terms of the regenerative medicine, so regenerative medicine encompasses three main principles, which is cell therapy, gene editing or gene therapy, and tissue engineering. So it's kind of the intersect. Yes.
3D tissue from a 3D printer and putting it in your body.
Yeah. It's called a bioprinter.
Right.
Yeah. It's really cool. And it's here and it's happening. And it's exactly. It's going to be, and it's just the beginning because there's so much research in this field right now. But the idea is the intersection of these three will allow us to take us to the next generation of medicine, which is where we're headed. You're already kind of seeing it because the FDA recently approved the first gene-edited cell therapy in US. It's called CAR-T, C-A-R-T. It's super expensive. It's not covered by insurance. It's like $500,000. But the point is, it's there, and it can actually cure cancer. And that's right, cure, not like just like radiate your whole body. And it's what they do is they take your own cells from your body, your T cells, and they gene edit them, and then they expand them, and then they put them IV, and they can actually target the specific cancer cells. And so it cures for leukemia and lymphoma right now. And so the excitement of this whole field is obviously that this is just the beginning, and stem cells themselves are just a molecule that help with regeneration, right? Like most people have heard of them because they're like, when you give birth, you have the umbilical cord tissue. It's like, oh, you can store your stem cells. And so it's like, why do you want to store your stem cells? It's because intuitively, that these things can help repair your body. So now the science has evolved from like just being basic science to being clinical, meaning it's not just using the cells for like research, which it was for like the last 30 years, but now it's like, hey, we can actually do something with these. And so you can take these stem cells, you can help them to rebuild tissue. So of course, chronic pain is one of the most common things we treat. Anyone with chronic pain, osteoarthritis, doing it the right way, it works so well for that. And then there's a whole anti-aging stuff, because you can take these cells and you can put them intravenously through your whole body, and they're just going to make you feel younger, look younger, and have more energy. It's basically like, it's almost like a Dracula thing. It's like taking young blood,
right,
but except you're taking young cells.
So these young cells, when we intravenously put them back in our body, is it creating new tissue around our joints? Is it reverse aging our organs? Is it like, can you tell us a little more about the, I guess, anatomical or physiological difference that our body would experience if we were to do this process?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not actually, so the stem cells that we use are called mesenchymal stem cells. And basically those mesenchymal stem cells are mainly signaling molecules. So it's not going to go in your body and like grow a tumor or something like that. That's not what they do. They actually mainly send signals. So they send signals from your lungs, from your heart, they go into your liver, kidney, they do go everywhere. And so what they do is they send signals to reduce inflammation and to help boost your immune system. And basically they're shifting the environment of the signaling. So for example, we treat people with autoimmune conditions, and it works really well because autoimmune conditions, it's like their own body cells are attacking themselves and they're pro-inflammatory. There's too much inflammation. And so this is called immunomodulation. That's the key. That's really the key of stem cells, meaning they're modulating or changing the signaling profile of how your body basically sends signals. So that's why it's actually pretty cool, because the IV stem cells don't stay in your body very long. Because before I used to think, is it going to cause a tumor? Is it going to cause cancer? Am I going to have other people's genetic material inside of me? None of that actually happens, because what happens is the stem cells only stay there maybe for a couple of weeks. But what they do is they change the signaling environment, and that signaling environment can have permanent or long-term effects. So that's why they work long-term. And so that's why people feel better and have more, and that's why it works so well for chronic pain, because what is chronic pain? It's inflammation at the root of it for most, and it comes down to immune system, comes down to the gut. And then, so that's why IV stem cells help with the repairing of the gut lining, and they reduce the inflammation. And that's why we're even combining it now with FMT, which is like poop pills, because poop pills basically are supercharged probiotics, and they're going to help repair your gut. And I really believe, it's not just believe, but that all the recent science suggests that the gut is really the root of most chronic disease.
Wow. So we got to treat our gut better. We got to eat healthier.
Yeah, but the problem is a lot of people's gut is too far. Like you can do all the naturopathic stuff. I'm not saying don't try that first, but there's so many patients who try that stuff and don't get better. So then it's like, what do you do then? And then that's where we come in. That's where we have the big guns,
So all the stuff that you're talking about is real. These are physical, actual things that are happening in real time. This is not theory. But I want to talk about Brian Johnson for a second. And Brian Johnson, for all the people who don't know who Brian Johnson is, this guy is spending tens of millions of dollars, if not up to 8 to 9 figures, $100 million if possible, to turn his 45, 50-year-old body, I think he's like in his 40s, and correct me for any inaccuracies, please. And he is trying to be physiologically, anatomically, biologically a 17-year-old. And he is spending a ton of money to do it. And we've actually reached out to Brian's team, and we're in the process of getting him on the calendar to bring him on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to talking to him. But I want to hear your perspective on all the things he's doing, and what is the most expensive thing he's doing, what thing you think yields the best results, and what's something that you think isn't really yielding any results.
He's doing so much, and I feel like there's certain, like, for example, he recently said he was doing the plasma exchange where he took his son's plasma and put it in his body, and then they didn't really notice any difference with that. So I feel like there's certain things that they're finding that, hey, these aren't actually doing much. And I feel like there is a lot of superfluous things he's doing, but it's also because I guess he has nothing better to do, and he's decided this is going to be all he's going to do. So I think I'm a very minimalist type of person, and I like to get the most bang for my buck. And that's why I like the combination of like the anti-aging we have with the IV and the follistatin, because it literally takes less than 2 hours and it lasts for like 2 years. And then it gives you so many benefits for anti-aging. So it's so efficient too. Whereas with Brian, he's spending so much time. To me, time is like, time is the one commodity we can't get back. And like, if I was an anti-ager biohacker type of person, which I kind of am, but I also value my time a lot. And so I don't want to be spending all my time trying to live longer when I want to enjoy my time spending with family and friends and doing fun things, and like doing research and doing all these things. So I just feel like from a philosophical perspective, I think the most bang for your buck is definitely going to be like the things that are going to be most efficient, which I think the red light therapy that he's doing is great, like infrared light therapy. I think he does hyperbaric oxygen too. I think those are the type of things that have good amount of evidence, that don't take that much time, and they're easy to do, and more accessible for most people. But then there's so many other more fringe things that he's kind of doing that are just kind of like, well, I don't know how much science there's behind that. Plus, like, is anyone going to really do this? And like the foundation, like by far the foundation and the number one most important thing by far for longevity is muscle mass. So if you don't have enough muscle mass and don't have strength, then what are you really doing? You don't even have the foundation, and then you're focusing on all these things up here, right? So there should be certain like markers of strength and that people should try to achieve, and if they can't do that, then like you got your whole order backwards.
I love that. All right, so now the conversation is naturally and organically shifting to what my audience can do right here, right now, with what they got from where they're at to increase their quality of life and live long enough to be called a centenarian. So let me ask you this. What are some of the free things that you're doing or you would recommend to people so they can eventually be a centenarian?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, like we're saying, is muscle. Like I'm pretty strong. Like I've deadlifted 600 pounds, and I try to push myself in the gym, and I don't do that just because I enjoy it, but it's also because I know how important it is for longevity. Muscle is the organ of longevity. Like that's the end of story. And it's an organ because it actually sends signals called myokines, which are little protein signaling molecules that go throughout your whole body. They go to your brain to reduce inflammation, protect from dementia. They reduce your risk of cancer, diabetes, all this cool stuff. So these myokines, every time you work out and you put on muscle, are being released from the muscle. So that can't be like underemphasized. And then I think from a longevity perspective, like I think the easiest interventions that it's very accessible now too, are the intravenous, not just stem cells, but intravenous exosomes. So exosomes, if you guys don't, a lot of people probably don't know, but the way I explain it is like, imagine you have like chicken soup, and the meat part is the stem cells, and then the broth, the soup, is the exosomes. So it has all the nutrients in there, and it reduces inflammation. And the exosomes you can do like every 3 to 6 months, and it's a lot cheaper, and it's something that's more accessible to it. But you just want to get good quality exosomes and working with like a doctor who knows what they're doing. But like, for example, like Tony Robbins does the exosomes, and he uses one of the products, the companies I work with, and he uses it like every 3 to 6 months, and just for anti-aging and longevity. And it's a very easy thing to do. It only takes, like less than an hour, and just going to give you that anti-aging benefit. And even the NFL recently started covering intravenous exosomes because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it helps to protect against, with TBI and CTE and all like the brain injuries. So, and it can help with brain fog and concentration and all these other things. So I feel like if you can't, because IV stem cells are still pretty pricey, but IV exosomes aren't as pricey. So I feel like that's something a lot of people could afford, and something that could help them live longer and give them better quality of life. And then the other thing, like I think doing like customized nutrition. So what that means is have you heard of the DNA company? No. Yeah, you should bring him on sometime, Adeel Khan. I think you'll love him because he's mapped out all these what are called functional genomics pathways. And so essentially based off your own body's DNA, you can figure out what type of food you should be eating. And what type of exercise you should be doing. And it's a very validated tool, and it's the only one in the world I know that has as much data as they do. Because there's a few companies out there, but this one is like the only legit one I've seen. But then the reason it's important for longevity is because everyone's like, oh, dairy's inflammatory, gluten's inflammatory. It's like, okay, well, is everything inflammatory? Like, it just depends on your body, right? And like, so the only way you're going to know that is if you're measuring it. And so the DNA test, by doing it, you kind of know what you should be eating. And then I like to combine that with like a continuous glucose monitor, like CGM, and then you can see how your body responds to different foods. So like you could eat a banana and I could eat a banana, and we could have two completely different responses to it. So the only way to know that is a CGM. And then obviously if it's spiking your insulin and it's causing your sugar to go up, then of course that food probably isn't suited for your body. So you can customize it because you basically the way you're going to age it gracefully to 100 is if you're going to keep your inflammation as low as possible as you age, right? From a broad level. And so that's why they call it inflammaging. And so the ways, and that's where the nutrition and exercise, doing it the right way, really makes a difference. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the exosomes and stem cells, because they're so anti-inflammatory and they reduce your biological age, and they help with different cell dysfunction. They target so many different hallmarks of aging. Like there's 8 or 9 hallmarks of aging, and the intravenous treatments target all of them.
This is incredible information. Let me ask you a question. How does someone get a measure on how much inflammation they currently have in their body?
It's a great question, because there's the problem is there's so many if you go to your average doctor, they're going to do like a very basic inflammatory markers. There's something called CRP and ESR, which is C-reactive protein, and erythrocyte like sedimentation rate, and those are just like general inflammatory markers, but they're so non-specific, and they also miss a lot too. So they're not that sensitive. So the best way to do that is actually the best test I've seen. There's one called Glycan Age, GYLCAN Age, and basically it's a proprietary test. But they actually measure more specifically like the inflammation and the sugar, and they look at the sugar molecules kind of attached to your hemoglobin. And so it's a little bit different from a regular blood sugar test, but basically it gives you a really good specific marker of how your body has, how much inflammation it has. So that's probably one of my favorite ones. And then there's also specific cytokines. So cytokines are like the inflammatory signals that get sent, right? So, and there's different cytokine profiles, but there are some companies out there now where you can do a whole cytokine test where you can measure IL-6, IL-1, TNF alpha, all these different cytokines, and get a good picture of the inflammation in your body. But they're not widely available. And they can be expensive too. When I was working in Dubai, they had it over there, but I haven't seen many companies in Canada, definitely not in Canada. And US, I don't think it's easily accessible either. But when I was in Dubai, I remember the company I was working with, they had that cytokine profile test. It was really cool. But we're it's interesting because US medical system is the best in certain ways, but it's also really bad in other ways.
How is it bad?
So it's because of I don't want to seem like I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not. It's just the FDA and the corruption that they have. It's a real thing. It's nothing to do with conspiracy. It's just, I've been to Japan. I've worked in Japan, and I can tell you, Japan and Dubai, those countries do not care about big pharma because they're not bought off by them. And so they're pushing peptides, they're pushing regenerative medicine, they're pushing gene therapy. But US is bought and paid for FDA. 70% of their funding comes from pharmaceutical companies. So what do you think their agenda is going to be? It's going to be to push drugs and regulate everything.
Fund the FDA.
Well, their donation. They're not. They can't do that.
What
their donations.
more do we need to hear than that?
Exactly, and it's almost like a joke, right? And so, and once you travel, though, I'm probably the only doctor in the world, and I'm pretty confident I am, that I've worked in different countries. I've worked in Japan. There's no other doctor I know of who's worked in different places like I have. And so I've worked in Japan, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Middle East. And so I can say very clearly the perspective I have and the biases I see in the Western medicine.
So there's some, either the pharmaceutical companies are in the government's pocket, or the government's in the pharmaceutical pocket, whichever way you want to put it. The pharmaceutical companies, which are multi-billion, I don't know what the most...
Pfizer's over 100 billion, right?
It's over $100 billion company, right? So... they definitely have an agenda for sure, right? They want to make more money, and
that's why these podcasts are so important. As social media started out as whatever, but now I feel like we have an opportunity here to change the narrative about medicine, and we're at that kind of inflection point. Joe Rogan talks about how he does stem cells, and Tony Robbins, and all these big people, right? And so it's starting to push the needle. And I think there is a movie coming out called Longevity Hackers. I have a short clip in it, but I'm definitely not the star. They're Halle Berry's in it, Edward Norton's narrating. They got The Rock's in it. They got a lot of big stars in there, and I have a small clip. But it's gonna be coming out in December, and I think that hopefully it'll be on Amazon or Netflix, and hopefully that'll move the needle a bit, in terms of getting people being hey, wait a minute, there's other options besides just drugs and surgery.
Unbelievable. Question: IV exosomes, how much does that cost?
It's like 5,000, 5 to 6,000. So it's
And that
not,
lasts how long?
usually 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You still have to do it pretty often. Yeah.
Okay. And interesting. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I think you were asking about like, general lifestyle stuff. Like, I think for people who want to really get into anti-aging and longevity, there's a lot of there is a lot of charlatans out there, and there's a lot of things being sold. So I think the biggest thing is just to keep in mind the foundations. And if you don't have the foundational stuff like your sleep, your stress, your exercise, your nutrition, your community, meaning, purpose, all that fundamental stuff, then like don't get caught up in all like the other stuff. Like I think just remembering that is like the foundation.
What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
It's a tool, right? And a tool is a tool, like carnivore diet, like keto. These are all tools. And like people always get into these fads where they're like, oh, IF is the best, keto is the best. It's like, well, it may be the best for you, but it doesn't work for everyone. And to me, it's a tool that I think you can use occasionally to help. Or if you like IF, great, do it every day. But like it's not for everyone.
Right.
And I also think from like a lot of people get focused, like especially scientists, and this is a problem with scientists who are speaking on podcasts all the time. They're not real doctors, and most of them aren't very strong or don't work out very much, or they don't look good with their shirt off, or they don't look good with their shirt off. You know what I mean? Like I'm just being honest. Like you have to look good. Like I'm just saying for me, because I lived, and I'm also a doctor in real world, and I'm doing research, so I know IF, like it's a tool that you can be used, but it's not a holy grail at all. And it just because mechanistically you have all this basic science research saying, hey, it increases mTOR, it blah blah blah, it increases like mitochondria, this, that. So they talk about all these cellular pathways, but does that actually translate into any clinical outcomes? I don't know. Does it? No one knows. There's no data on that. So it's just they're just focusing on mechanisms.
Yeah. I have two more things I'm going to ask. How important do you think mindfulness is, presence, and living in the moment is attributed to longevity?
I think I would say it's more impactful on your health than smoking would be detrimental on your health. And that's based off research. And they've done research where they've looked at that type of stuff. And being lonely, for example, loneliness is equivalent to smoking like 2 packs of cigarettes a day on your health. And so that's wild, right? So we're creatures that are meant to be meaningful, purposeful, and social, playful creatures. And people got a lot of stuff backwards. And mindfulness is like, I think, it's so important. It can't overemphasize how important it is, but like also like how to achieve that, right? Like it can be different for everyone, but I think I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan of like psilocybin, like those type of things. And like, I think those things can be so useful for so many people.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask you a kind of a difficult question before we wrap up this podcast. I'm going to ask you this last question, then we're going to do a quick 2-minute game that I want to play with you. Question: where were we before we were born, and where do we go after we die?
Woo. I believe we were. I don't know. I think we were somewhere in our ancestors' DNA. I don't know, before, I guess. And after we die, I think our energy and our spirit goes back into the universe. That's what I think.
Okay. So the question that I asked first was where do we go before we were born? And your answer was very scientific. It was, hey, you're a sperm cell living in your dad's testy, was basically what you said, right?
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. But your answer is after we die, you think our soul, our consciousness, our spirit lives on forever. Where do you think it lives on in the physical realm of reality?
It's not a physical realm. I think there's another realm. Another realm. So this is just based off so there's a really good book you'd probably like. It's called The Physics of God. And it's basically talks about how the principles of physics explain why there's most likely some sort of universal energy or being out there. And this because of something called dark energy. So most of the universe is actually made up of dark energy, and no one even knows really what that is. Like they're still trying to figure it out, but it's all this massive energy, and they're like, where is it coming from? So the theory some people have is that maybe it's another dimension that we can't see, and that's maybe where we go after. I don't know.
I love it.
That's what
I couldn't agree more.
I think that's real. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. All right, here we go. We're gonna play a game. I am going to list off anywhere between 15 to 20 biohacking or diet or health terms. and I want you to say good, bad, indifferent. You can say whatever you want with it, but we're going to keep the answers really super short, okay? First one, cold plunge.
Indifferent.
Okay, how come?
Because it's super uncomfortable, and I think the benefits of it are just mechanistic, and there's no data to say like long term it actually improves anything. And I think if you want to get that priming of your body, the best would do a 1 rep max. If you can do a 1 rep max, that's a million times better than a freaking cold plunge.
Okay,
this is where you have to lift the weight, and if you don't lift the weight, you basically get crushed by it. So
yoga.
Good. Yeah, good.
We talked about intermittent fasting. HGH.
Good. Peptides especially.
Okay. Ice cream.
Indifferent, because it can make people feel better.
Is ice cream worth it?
For some people it can bring a lot of pleasure, but it also depends on the type of ice cream, right? So, but yeah, I guess generally it's bad for you, but I think it's always about the thing with food. The most important thing to take away about food is what's your relationship with food. If you have a healthy relationship with food, it's fine. But if you have a poor relationship with food and you're using it to cope with emotions, that's the problem.
Okay. Red light therapy.
Good.
Okay. EMF radiation.
Bad.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that a little?
So in short, you get a lot of positive ions. Our cells, we are cellular creatures, right? Disease starts in the cell. And one of the things that we know now is if you have too many positive ions, it can screw up the cellular kind of like voltages. And so you need to get negative ions. And so negative ions to combat all the radiation that we get. And so negative ions come from mountains, from nature, from water, sands.
Grounding.
Like it's crazy, right? So we obviously belong in nature too, right? So.
Okay. So how do you feel about earthing mats and grounding mats and things like that?
I mean, I think compared to going to a body of water and actually just being present in mindfulness, that's going to be way more bang for your buck, or going hiking in the mountains or something like that.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, blue light exposure.
Yeah, bad. And I think most people know how to combat it. You have Dave. I know I've been talking to Dave Asprey too. I know you had him on your show. So he talks about he has his own goggles.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. CBD oil.
Good.
Okay. Yogurt.
Fermented, unprocessed, no sugar. Good.
Good for the gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Soda.
Terrible. And sugar is what they've done with sugar is the same thing that I have to get this out because I love it. The tobacco industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the big food industry are all the same. They have the same playbooks. They all do the same things, which is they lie, and then until they get found out, and then they're like, oh, sorry, they get sued, they pay a bit, but they've made hundreds of billions or whatever. It doesn't matter. So that they're all the same playbook. So big food with sugar is the same.
Okay. Coffee.
Good.
Okay. Psilocybin.
Yeah, a huge fan.
Huge fan in like hero doses.
Microdosing, but also for therapeutic purposes. Psilocybin assisted therapy is great for PTSD, anxiety, mental health issues. I think you're going to see a lot more mainstream of that for sure.
Do you follow a certain protocol when it comes to microdosing?
I like 50. I think 50 milligrams can help with just focus and concentration personally.
Every day or every 3 days?
Not every day, no, but just like a few here and there.
Every once in a while. Okay, yeah. I like that. I like that too. Alcohol.
Bad.
Avoid at all costs.
I mean, it's a toxic. It's literally a poison. Yeah. I think again, it can it can increase your social fun, but I feel like so can marijuana, and marijuana doesn't have the same negative side effects.
Okay, I have 5 more. Okay, and that was one of them. Marijuana.
Yeah, I think if with THC, it's again I think it can help you disassociate a little bit, and that disassociation, if done correctly, can help with creativity. It can help with mental health. So again, it has to be done properly, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Do it with a professional.
Okay, 4 more. Adderall.
Terrible. Yeah, it's honestly really bad for society because the overdiagnosis and the overprescription of Adderall is really bad for our youth, and it's becoming a really big problem.
I agree. So avoid Adderall at all costs, or is there a healthy way to eat it? Tell me.
No, I get it. Obviously some kids, but the problem is there's nothing else is being tried. Nothing else is being recommended. Right. What about, no one's looking at the food. No one's looking at why did they get ADHD? There's so many other factors and you could do a whole thing about that. Right. So,
all right. Last 2, keto diet.
Indifferent, but generally bad because it's overprescribed and everyone thinks they need to do keto and not everyone does. Some people need carbs, especially if you're doing high resistance training. Right.
And when we talk about carbs, we're talking about fruit and vegetables. We're not and sweet potatoes. We're not talking about bread.
We're talking unrefined, unprocessed.
Got it. Okay. And last one, masturbation?
Good.
Okay.
I like
Why?
Sex with Emily. I don't know if you know her podcast. She has a great podcast, and she's a sex therapist, PhD. And yeah, you could go into all about it, but basically, we're designed for that again, and it's good for our health and our biology. It releases oxytocin, and it helps with bonding, like sex in general. But masturbation, obviously, knowing your body can help raise awareness, and then so that can help you, with other ways.
Healthier to actually have sex instead of.
Of course, but knowing your body is important too, and a lot of people never explore their own body, so they can't have proper sex because they don't even know their own body.
Wow, well said, my man. I want to thank you so much for taking.
Yeah, we got to get you to where you based.
I live in Jupiter, Florida.
Yeah, I was just there, so we'll link up.
Where were you?
I was in Miami.
Okay.
At some celebrities' houses that I can't say.